On May 4, 1990, at Florida State Prison, an execution turned into a nightmare. Joseph Tafero, 43, sat on Old Sparky, but instead of a swift death, 6-inch flames erupted from his head. Convicted of murdering 2 police officers in 1976, Taffero became the focus of a controversial case that shocked America. From a fateful traffic stop to the moment justice became public torture, this story poses a haunting question. Can a flawed death sentence forever obscure the truth? In today's video, we'll explore his final meal and the last words he spoke before his life ended. This case revolves around the tragic deaths of 2 dedicated officers, Philip A. Black, 39, a Florida highway patrolman with 9 years of experience, and Donald Irwin, also 39, an Ontario provincial police officer from Canada with 18 years of service. Black was a devoted father beloved by his colleagues for his dedication and sense of responsibility. Irwin, Black's close friend, visited Florida to see him, bringing with him an optimistic smile and a passion for his profession. On the morning of February 20, 1976, at a secluded rest stop on a Florida highway, both were conducting a routine vehicle check when they were unexpectedly and brutally shot dead. Their deaths left an unfillable void for their families, friends, and communities. Black left behind his wife and 2 young children. Irwin, a colleague in Canada, left behind the memory of a hero. Why did these 2 men protectors of justice become victims of such a horrific crime? The perpetrator behind this heinous crime was Joseph Tafero, born on October 12, 1946, in New York, who grew up in a tumultuous environment. His family broke apart early. His parents divorced when Taffero was young, leaving him to grow up with a lack of affection and support. Dropping out of school early, Taffero embarked on a life of crime from a young age. At 20, he was convicted of armed robbery and oral copulation. In 1967, Taffero and his accomplice, Philip Weinschenker, broke into an apartment holding 2 women hostage for 11 hours. They raped one, tied up the other, and stole various belongings, including money, jewelry, and clothing. Arrested shortly after, Taffero was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but was paroled in 1974 for good behavior. After his release, Taffero met Sonia "Sonny" Jacobs, a young woman with 2 small children, ages 9 and 10 months. The couple lived a transient life, often moving with Walter Rhodes, a friend of Taffero's. Despite seeming to have turned his life around, Taffero's violent past was a shadow that never left him. He had been sued for threatening a partner, and his extensive criminal record painted a picture of a dangerous, volatile individual. Did years of incarceration and an unstable childhood push Taffero onto a path of murder, or was he merely a victim of a justice system quick to condemn? On the morning of February 20, 1976, the early sun illuminated a desolate rest stop on a Florida highway. Officers Philip Black and Donald Irwin, on patrol, noticed an unusually parked car. Inside, Jesse Taffero, Sonny Jacobs, their 2 young children, and Walter Rhodes were asleep. Black, with his extensive experience, spotted a gun on the car floor. A handgun legally registered to Jacobs, who had purchased it on Taffero's behalf since he was ineligible for a license due to his criminal record. Black asked Rhodes to step out first, then Taffero for a routine check. What happened next was a nightmare. According to Rhodes's testimony, Taffero suddenly pulled out the gun, fatally shooting both Black and Irwin in an instant. Shots echoed, blood stained the pavement, and the 2 officers fell without a chance to react. Taffero, according to Rhodes, then led the group into the police car to escape. However, Taffero told a different story. It was Rhodes who fired the shots, then handed the gun to him so Rhodes could drive. Forensic evidence further complicated matters. A stun gun purchased by Jacobs months earlier was fired before the murders. The prosecutor argued that Jacobs fired the stun gun at Black, incapacitating him before Taffero grabbed the handgun and shot both officers. After the shooting, the trio panicked. They abandoned the police car, kidnapped a passing man, and stole his vehicle to continue their escape. The getaway didn't last long. At a roadblock, police surrounded and arrested all three. When apprehended, the handgun was found in Taffero's waistband, while gunpowder residue on the hands of Rhodes Taffero and even Jacobs sparked intense debate who truly pulled the trigger. A truck driver who witnessed the event testified that the first shots seemed to come from the back seat where Jacobs was sitting. In that chaotic moment, what transformed a routine traffic stop into a bloody massacre, Florida police swiftly launched an investigation following the double murder. The handgun found in Taffero's waistband was key evidence, but gunpowder residue tests complicated matters. Residue on Rhodes' hands indicated he fired a weapon, while residue on Taffero's hands was consistent with handling an unclean or newly fired weapon, or possibly having fired a weapon. Even Jacobs and her 9-year-old son had gunpowder residue, leading prosecutors to suspect all three were directly involved. The chase ended at a roadblock where Taffero, Jacobs, and Rhodes were apprehended after a tense pursuit. "I didn't do anything," Taffero yelled as he was handcuffed, while Jacobs remained silent, her eyes filled with panic. The breakthrough came when Walter Rhodes signed a plea agreement agreeing to testify against Taffero and Jacobs in exchange for a reduced sentence to second-degree murder. Rhodes testified that Jacobs fired the stun gun from the back seat, incapacitating Black, before Taffero took the handgun and fatally shot both officers. However, Rhodes's testimony was inconsistent. In 1977, 1979, and 1982, he recanted his testimony 3 times, claiming he himself shot the officers before reverting to his original statement. Another witness, the truck driver, reinforced the theory that the first shots came from the back seat. Police and the FBI collaborated to analyze traffic camera footage and scene evidence, but the contradictions in Rhodes's testimony plagued the investigation team. Did they catch the right perpetrator? Or was Rhodes manipulating the truth to save himself? The 1976 trial in Florida was a tense affair. Taffero and Jacobs were indicted on first-degree murder charges, with the prosecutor emphasizing the brutality of the crime and Taffero's extensive criminal history. Rhodes, under his plea agreement, testified that Jacobs fired the stun gun from the back seat, then Taffero grabbed the handgun and fatally shot Black and Irwin. The defense argued that Rhodes was the shooter and Taffero merely came into possession of the gun afterwards. They highlighted the inconsistencies in Rhodes's testimony, but the prosecutor emphasized the gunpowder residue on Taffero's hands and the gun in his waistband. The jury recommended the death penalty for Taffero and life imprisonment for Jacobs based on her lack of a prior criminal record. However, Judge Daniel Futch, known as Maximum Dan for his harsh sentences, overruled the recommendation and sentenced both to death. "This was a cold, unforgivable murder," Futch declared. Rhodes received 3 life sentences, later paroled in 1994 for good behavior. Black and Irwin's families, though relieved by the verdict, remained in agony from their loss. But with Rhodes's contradictory testimony and ambiguous forensic evidence, was justice truly served, or did a miscarriage of justice send 2 people to their deaths? On May 4th of 1990, at Florida State Prison, Jesse Taffero walked into the execution chamber facing Old Sparky, the electric chair. His last meal was simple steak French fries and black coffee. When asked for his last words, Taffero looked directly at the witnesses and said, "I am innocent, but justice will come." No one was prepared for what happened next. Due to a technical error, the execution team used a synthetic sponge instead of a natural sea sponge, which is essential for better conductivity. The electric chair malfunctioned. 6-inch flames erupted from Taffero's head. Black smoke filled the room. He groaned in agony, his body convulsing through 3 jolts of electricity, lasting a horrifying 7 minutes. Witnesses, including Black's family, were horrified. Some fainted. The autopsy later confirmed death by electrocution and severe burns. Did this brutal death bring solace to the victims' families, or only deepen the doubts about justice? The case of Joseph Tafero remains highly controversial, raising poignant questions about justice, capital punishment, and hidden truths. The flames that erupted from Taffero's head during his 1990 execution became a symbol for opponents of the electric chair, citing it as proof of a cruel and flawed system. Walter Rhodes's contradictory testimonies, where he confessed and recanted 3 times, fueled suspicions that Taffero might not have been the shooter. Forensic evidence, while implicating Taffero, was not clear enough to definitively identify who pulled the trigger. Sonny Jacobs Taffero's wife had her sentence reduced to life imprisonment in 1981 when the Florida Supreme Court found that Judge Futch lacked a sufficient basis to override the jury's recommendation. In 1992, after an appeals court found prosecutors had withheld exculpatory evidence, Jacobs entered an Alford plea to 2 counts of second-degree murder and was released. She later married Peter Pringle, an exonerated man from Ireland, and together they founded the Sonny Center, an organization that helps other exonerees heal through yoga and meditation. Tragically, Jacobs passed away in a house fire in County Galway, Ireland, in June 2025, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and forgiveness. Black and Irwin's families live with permanent grief. Black's wife raised their 2 children with the memory of their heroic father, while Irwin's colleagues in Canada hold annual commemorations. The case was reenacted in the films In the Blink of an Eye, 1996, and The Exonerated 2005, highlighting the justice system's flaws. But journalist Ellen McGarrahan, who wrote a book about the case, argued that Taffero was not entirely innocent, and forensic evidence suggested Jacobs might have fired the stun gun, initiating the tragic chain of events. The Taffero case reminds us, can a flawed system truly guarantee the truth? Is capital punishment truly the answer to violence? This story leaves us with a lesson about the cost of hasty judgment and the importance of seeking truth, no matter how painful. What are your thoughts on Joseph Taffero's fate and the lessons from this tragedy?